Arirang Prime.
도발과 위협은 고립과 파멸을 자초할 뿐입니다.
We're going to discuss how we can discourage action like nuclear and missile tests that escalate tensions and violate international obligations.
明白な安保理決議違反であり、我が国の安全保障上の重大な挑発行為であります。
维护朝鲜半岛的和平稳定，是有关各方的共同责任，也符合各方的共同利益。
Korea. To its north lies China, and to its south, Japan. From 1950 to 1953, it went through the Korean War, which left the peninsula divided into two, North Korea and South Korea. The war isn't over. It has been more than 60 years since the two Koreas agreed on an armistice. But their military standoff is still in progress.
The border, which now the DMZ, is the most highly militarized border in the world. Both of them have a huge number of weapons trained at the other. There is massive deterrence in conventional weapons. Nuclear weapons, it seems, are just another step.
Amid suffocating tension, the two countries have taken very different paths. Under liberal democracy, South Korea became the 11th largest economy in the world. In contrast, North Korea chose a socialist system and has been unable to shed its status as one of the world's poorest countries, resulting from its closed social structure and economic failure. Nevertheless, North Korea has successfully continued its three-generation lineage of leadership, as well as its nuclear programs under international sanctions. Poverty, violation of human rights, and once again, with its nuclear weapon development, North Korea is catching global attention.
우리의 힘에 100% 의거한 이번 시험을 통하여 소형화된 수소탄의 위력을 과학적으로 해명하였다.
North Korea's claims of a successful hydrogen bomb test haven't been verified.
It actually has two fissile material programs, a plutonium program, which we know is producing, and a uranium program, which is probably producing. So what North Korea want is to be recognized as a de facto nuclear state.
Can North Korea's hydrogen bomb claims be true? A hydrogen bomb is powered by nuclear fusion of hydrogen isotopes, which is much more powerful than an atomic bomb that derives its energy from nuclear fission of plutonium or uranium.
사찰은 북한에서 이제 수소를 사용했다고 주장을 하고 있고요. 수소폭탄이라고 주장은 하지만 그 성공에 이르지는 못한 걸로 보여집니다. 다음 실험은 아마도 핵무기를 실전 배치하기 위한 마지막 실험 정도가 되지 않을까 보여집니다.
South Korea began taking practical measures against North Korea's nuclear tests. Kaesong Industrial Complex, located 500 meters west of the DMZ. KIC is part of the Exchange and Cooperation Project that began under the June 15th North-South Joint Declaration. It became a symbol of the two Koreas' economic cooperation, with South Korea's resources and technology, and North Korea's supply of land and labor. In total, South Korea invested about $840 million in KIC. However, just 35 days after North Korea's fourth nuclear test, South Korea decided to completely suspend KIC's operation. Considering the scale of the investment put into KIC, why did South Korea choose to shut it down?
국제사회가 원하는 평화의 길이 아니라 핵무기와 장거리 미사일을 고도화하는 데 쓰여진 것으로 보입니다. 북한이 핵을 포기하고 변화할 수밖에 없도록 하는 특단의 대책이 요구되고 있습니다.
A total of 124 South Korean companies pulled out, causing about $1.8 billion in loss. Many South Koreans also voiced their opposition to the KIC suspension. However, in order to counteract North Korea's nuclear development and tests, the South Korean government held fast to its position that KIC must shut down.
안보리에서 하루속히 강력한 제재 조치를 만들어내야 할 것입니다.
It was a significant change from previous government policies that favored friendly North-South relations and unification bonanza strategy.
국제사회를 설득하기 위해서는 우리부터 대북 제재에 앞장서야 된다라는 그런 어려움을 겪었죠. 이에 따라서 지난 10년간 운영해온 개성공단을 폐쇄하지 않고는 한국이 국제사회의 대북 제재를 주도하기는 매우 어려운 상황이었고,
March 2nd, 2016, the UN Security Council held a meeting. The 15 member nations gathered at a conference hall. The United States, Japan, and Korea appealed for strict sanctions against North Korea, while China and Russia called for resumption of six-party talks, emphasizing communication and negotiation. And eventually, the UN Security Council unanimously agreed upon Resolution 2270. It imposes a variety of sanctions, including inspection of all cargoes destined for North Korea, prevention of mineral exports, and cutting off all financial sources for weapons of mass destruction. The UN Security Council's resolution showed an immediate effect. On March 5th, the Philippines government impounded the North Korean cargo ship Jinteng and deported its crew. The Jintang was registered as belonging to Sierra Leone. However, the Filipino government seized the cargo ship because the resolution listed its International Maritime Organization's number as North Korean.
Alerted by UN about vessels coming from North Korea to be more careful and meticulous inspection, and that's what we did.
The Jintang became the first ship to be impounded under the UN Security Council sanctions.
반공화국 제재 결의를 조작해낸 대가로 우리의 핵 보유국 지위와 위성 발사국 지위가 어떻게 연구화되는가를 똑똑히 보게 될
The resolution sparked a strong backlash from North Korea. Kim Jong-un unveiled a nuclear warhead, an intercontinental ballistic missile, and weapon blueprints.
Even if sanctions damage the North Korean economy, it will not be enough. It will not prompt the North Korean government to surrender nuclear weapons. They will keep nuclear weapons no matter what.
The South Korean government announced termination of Rajin Hassan Railroad construction that began as a three-way joint project. The Rajin Hassan project is a cross-border logistics system designed to transport Russian products from Hassan to Rajin port and eventually export them to various countries by ship. The termination was imposed as a strong measure to cut off North Korea's waterway. April 1st, 2016. The Nuclear Security Summit took place in Washington, D.C. The United States and Japan showed great support for South Korea's sanctions against North Korea.
이제 중요한 것은 결의를 철저히 이행해 나감으로써 북한이 핵포기 없이는 생존할 수 없음을 깨닫게 하는 것이라고 봅니다.
We are united in our efforts to deter and defend against North Korean provocations. We recognize that our security is linked.
China, North Korea's major ally nation, also announced strong sanctions against North Korea.
"我们绝不允许半岛生战、生乱。一旦发生这样的情况，对谁都没有好处。作为联合国安理会常任理事国，中国全面完整执行联合国安理会。"
China holds the key to the success or failure of these sanctions. It shares national borders with North Korea, which depends heavily on China for foreign trade.
China 的商务部连同其他部门也出台了一个对朝鲜 这个制裁的，就是核武制裁的一个清单，那个清单列得更为详细一点。我并不会觉得这个制裁是空前的，因为我觉得这个制裁比较上次比较只是有一点程度上的变化，并不是很大的变化。因为比较13年的那个制裁，中国的制裁还是有一点推进，但是并不是说突然一起来那么大的。所以这个制裁，我觉得主要的中国的目的还是希望朝鲜能回到谈判桌来，跟其他国家一起对话。这个是中国的一个目的。那么，中国对朝鲜的制裁，在联合国也声明就是不涉及民生的这个。所以呢，我觉得这也是希望，我们的意思不是让把朝鲜压垮。
The goal of the sanctions is to stop North Korea from developing nuclear weapons and bring them to the negotiation table. That's why Chinese sanctions against North Korea is critical.
앞으로 중국이 안보리 상임 이사국으로서 필요한 역할을 해줄 것으로 믿습니다.
If China decides to actively impose sanctions, the North Korean economy will take a severe blow. After the Cheonan sinking in 2010, the South Korean government implemented the May 24 sanctions that ban all trade and investment with the North. This increased North Korea's economic dependence on China. Currently, China accounts for over 90% of North Korea's foreign trade.
중국은 대외교뿐만 아니라 북한으로 가는 원유를 100% 공급하고 있거든요. 그걸 제한하거나 중단하거나 아니면 교역을 엄격히 제한하거나 중국에 나와 있는 북한 노동자들의 송금이나 어떤 그 비자 기간을 만료됐을 때 허가해주지 않거나 연장시키지 않거나 하게 되면 북한 경제에 치명적인 타격을 받게 되죠.
Tandong, a Chinese city bordering North Korea. This is where most of North Korean-Chinese trade takes place. Before the sanctions came into effect, anywhere between 100 to 200 trucks crossed the border to North Korea. Trade between the two countries not only affects North Korea, but also the Chinese economy. About 20 to 30% of citizens living in the border area sustain their livelihoods through North Korean-Chinese trade. After 2 months of sanctions, South Korean products now fill the shelves that were once lined with North Korean products. The majority of food items, including drinks and snacks, are South Korean products.
还有韩国货，那时候没进，现在种类有时候可能那时候正在途中的货，他来的时候没赶上到吧。
为啥呀？跟那个？
因为不是人少，现在就是人少，再一个
跟那个朝鲜那个
放一起还是。
The Amnokgang cruise business has slowed down as well. The number of visitors fell significantly.
现在是游客多啊，购物少，想到买礼品行了。现在。
现在这个朝鲜纪念品来的多不多？那边。
这个呀。哦。这是
There were many travel agencies in Tandong that sold North Korean travel packages, but some of them went completely out of business following the implementation of sanctions against North Korea.
军事挑衅，特别通过核试验和远程导弹试验，在这样情况之下，这个中国除了参与联合国安理会制定制裁决议之外，很难再做别的。那么这一次有一个跟过去不大一样的地方，就中国认真执行联合国制裁决议的程度超过以往任何先前时。
The international community's action toward denuclearization of North Korea. The changes in Tandong are a visible manifestation of that resolution. North Korea responded to the international sanctions with yet another nuclear test. June 3rd, 2016. North Korea released new video footage of a submarine-launched ballistic missile fired on April 23rd. The missile fired out of a 2,000-ton Shimpo-class submarine, ignited above the sea, and flew into the sky.
SLBM은 그 연안까지 숨어 들어가서 잠수함에서 발사를 할 수 있는 기술이기 때문에 조금 더 짧은 그런 사거리를 가져도 훨씬 더 위협적인 그런 무기가 됩니다. 그래서 북한에서도 잠수함에서 발사하는 기술을 확보하고자 지금 계속 노력을 하고 있고.
Submarine-launched ballistic missile. As its name states, these missiles launch from submarines close to the target destination, unlike intercontinental ballistic missiles that launch from the ground. Kim Jong-un monitored the test and showed great satisfaction in this powerful weapon. Experts predict that North Korea will possess SLBMs in the near future.
I don't think they have perfected the system to deliver them. They have some nuclear weapons, and the longer this goes, the more they'll develop.
Some say they have already achieved technology to put the bombs on the missiles. Some say not yet. But, well, either way, eventually they will sooner acquire capability to put bombs on the missiles. So countries, South Korea, Japan, the United States, have to be prepared.
North Korea's steps towards nuclear development have never ceased since its regime came into existence. It began its nuclear development program during Kim Il-sung's rule. That was when they built the foundation. They established a nuclear research center in the 1960s. And began operating a research-type nuclear reactor in 1967. And during Kim Jong-il's rule, North Korea focused on securing nuclear materials and tested nuclear weapons in 2006 and 2009. But their technology and even their threats were minor then. It was when Kim Jong-un took the helm that significant changes began taking place. North Korea tested nuclear weapons in 2013 and 2016 and paraded its ambition to become a nuclear power. But North Korea is an NPT party and cannot possess nuclear weapons.
소련이 북한에게 소위 중수로라고 하는 작은 원자로를 제공하는 조건이 그러면 이것은 무기로 전용될 수 있는 원자로이므로 NPT라고 하는 국제규범에 가입하면 이것을 소위 제공해 준다라고 하는 조건이었거든요. 소련과 북한 간의 관계에 일종의 결과로서 NPT를 들어간 거예요.
North Korea announced its intent to withdraw from the NPT in 1993 and declared itself a nuclear power. But they are all North Korea's claims. Once a member, it cannot simply withdraw or possess nuclear weapons.
I think we should not be accepting North Korea legitimately having nuclear weapons. Because if you do so, perhaps that may encourage arguments in other countries. If North Korea is allowed to have nuclear weapons, we should also have nuclear weapons. And that will open the doors for nuclear proliferation.
North Korea never stopped testing nuclear weapons or launching missiles even under international sanctions. It conducted nuclear tests and missile development simultaneously. North Korea proved its possession of powerful nuclear weapons through nuclear tests and showed the world that it has the missiles to deliver them far. A nuclear weapon is dropped on its destination by loading a missile with a nuclear warhead. North Korea's missile technology has continuously developed. Currently, North Korea claims to possess Rodong missiles with a range of 1,300 kilometers, as well as Musudan missiles with a range of 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers, and intercontinental ballistic missiles with a range of 10,000 kilometers.
사실상 북한이 뭐 미국을 공격하기 위해서 만들었겠어요. 말로는 이제 선제 타격 권리가 있다 하지만 능력으로는 그게 안 되는 것이거든요. 자멸이거든. 그러니까 그거는 결국은 이제 억지용이죠. 남북 분단 체제에서 여러 가지 국력 격차를 극복할 수 있는 가장 값싼 무기고.
Nuclear weapons and exaggerated external threats help North Korea maintain its regime, develop nuclear weapons, and promote internal unity.
The campaign that the regime has waged always, since the beginning of North Korea state, to make people believe that their state is threatened by the outside world, does produce support for the regime. Also, North Korea is very good at using very emotional, patriotic appeals, and especially racist appeals.
North Korea also used its fourth nuclear test in 2016 as part of its internal propaganda.
이번 수소탄 시험의 완전 승리는 우리 공화국의 존엄과 위력을 만천하에 가시한 역사적인 대상도라고 생각합니다. 김일성 민족, 김정일 자손의 천만인의 미래를 담보해주는 어머니 우리 당의 고마움의 인사를 드리고 싶습니다.
North Korea has been using nuclear weapons as leverage to overcome the economic gap between the two Koreas and maintain its regime and system.
They respond quite quickly when they feel that the other side is not living up to its part of the agreement. But the other thing is, today, they've moved much further than they were in the 1990s. So now they already have these things. It's much harder to think that they would actually give them up.
South Korea's most important ally and the signer of the armistice agreement, the United States, has a fixed stance against North Korea's nuclear weapons. It demands complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of North Korea.
We're not going to stop putting pressure on the DPRK as long as they continue provocative actions.
The U.S. has committed to strategic patience, a policy that involves waiting for North Korea to denuclearize.
We were very concerned about not overreacting to every North Korean provocation because we didn't want to be led around by the nose every time the North did some sort of missile test or nuclear test. And we've now fallen into a spiral where we consciously try to underreact, so we were overreacting when the capabilities were probably not as formidable. And now we have a tendency to underreact when the capabilities are moving at a pace that we haven't seen in the past.
The U.S. is unwavering in its policy.
Americans tend to think about it as our experience. It was a global experience.
The sanctions are a way to bring North Korea to the negotiation table.
I think all of us completely share a goal of a completely nuclear-free peninsula. I don't believe we have significant difference between the United States and Korea on how we're proceeding. I think we know we're not going to proceed unless we know we're going to a disarmed, nuclear-free North Korea.
Both the United States and China share a common goal when it comes down to North Korea's nuclear program. They both want denuclearization, but they have different approaches. North Korea's nuclear tests continued. June 22nd, 2016. Its sixth Musudan missile traveled 400 kilometers. The distance was made possible by a steep, near-vertical angle. Many experts agree that this was related to atmospheric re-entry technology and a nuclear warhead explosion test. North Korea's possession of nuclear weapons poses a great threat to neighboring countries. Japan still remembers the nightmare of the Hiroshima bombing.
私どもはもう原爆のその時代に生きてきた人間だから恐ろしさというものを十分感じておるので、もう政治の世界ですから我々がどうしたところでそれを変えるわけにはいかんけど、
それは脅威だと思いますね。飛んできたら日本国民が犠牲になるわけですから、平和的な解決を望みますけども、圧力も必要だと思います。
Even China, North Korea's ally, is not safe from its neighbor's nuclear threats.
周边的国家可能影响都会就是比较大，就是潜在危险会有，但是也不知道他们会怎么用，所以这个可能按照我觉得应该就是依据这个国际条例。
But the country that feels the most threatened is South Korea, which is in a military standoff across the demilitarized zone.
가장 큰 건 대화라고 생각하고요. 강력한 무기나 무력이나 뭔가 제재할 수 있는 수단도 동시에 가져가야 저희도 여러 가지 대화 테이블에서 많은 것들을 취할 수 있다고 생각합니다.
한반도의 평화는 중요하죠. 근데 그 평화를 위해서 조금만 강압적으로 나가도 되지 않을까 생각합니다.
Along with newly imposed sanctions, discussions about deploying THAAD to South Korea began as military measures against the North Korean threat.
북한의 핵, 또 미사일 위협 이런 것을 우리가 감안해 가면서 우리의 안보와 국익에 따라서 검토해 나갈 것입니다.
Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. THAAD is an anti-ballistic missile system designed to intercept enemy missiles at an altitude of 40 kilometers to 140 kilometers.
북한의 핵이 계속 개발이 되고 또 40에서 150km로 날아오는 미사일을 방어할 한국형 KAMD, 한국형 미사일 방어 체계가 2023년까지 구축되지 않고 있는 상황에서 한국이 대안으로서 사드 배치를 논의하는 것은 한국의 안보상 불가피하다고 봅니다.
However, opinions diverge. Some say that if North Korea attacks South Korea, it will not be with nuclear weapons. And whether THAAD would be able to defend the South if North Korea were to use nuclear weapons remains debatable.
북한이 공격하는 고도가 대부분 다연장포나 아니면 그 스커드 단거리 미사일로 공격을 하는데 그거는 사드가 방어할 수 있는 범위 미치예요. 주한 미군을 보호함으로써 반격할 수 있는 그 역량은 우리가 축적이 가능합니다.
Strong opposition regarding THAAD deployment emerged from China. During the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington, D.C., Chinese President Xi Jinping asserted China's opposition to THAAD.
不是你韩国操作的，萨德系统特别它雷达根据广泛的报道，可以监控中国西安以东的所有导弹活动。中国对美最起码程度的战略威慑将受到严重损害。如果真要部署的话，那么只有一条路，中国就跟美国进一步进行核军备竞赛。中国会大量增加中国的战略核导弹，改善中国战略核导弹质量，同时甚至还会考虑部署中国自己的反导系统。
China argued that once the United States deploys THAAD, it will be able to detect and track intercontinental ballistic missiles located in eastern China, meaning that the system will be used to keep surveillance over China.
중국이 생각하는 이겁니다. 사드가 미국의 미사일 방어 체제인데 국가와 국가끼리 미사일 방어 체제로 연맹을 맺어가지고 중국을 포위한 나토식으로 동아시아에서 중국을 포위하게 되는 그런 것이 이것은 중국의 부상을 억제하려는 미국의 큰 어떤 그런 계획 그런 일부분이 아닌가라는 그런 의구심이 있고.
However, the United States explains that THAAD is not a threat to China at all.
Donald Trump's comments suggesting that, on the issue of THAAD, I am mystified by Chinese opposition to that. it makes no sense. They say that somehow THAAD it negatively affects their own military capacity. Well, THAAD is designed to shoot down missiles, and Chinese missiles are located 1,000 miles away. THAAD, the radar, sees 250 miles.
July 8th, 2016. South Korea's Ministry of National Defense officially announced deployment of THAAD.
우리 국민의 안전을 보장하고 한미 동맹의 군사력을 보호하기 위한 방어적 조치로서 주한미군의 사드 체계를 배치하기로 한미 동맹 차원에서 결정하였습니다.
Changes in North Korea and China relations were detected long before the decision. May 31st, 2016. Vice President of North Korea's Workers' Party, Ri Soo-young, visited China. North Korea and China are neighboring countries separated by the Amnokang. They have been longtime allies, and being so geographically close doesn't make it easy for China to impose sanctions against North Korea.
The United States is not geographically, you are not sitting next to DPRK, right? China is. So it's very different in terms of the consequences of if anything goes wrong, right? China will have to be the one to absorb all those negative, repercussions.
If North Korea were to collapse or become enveloped in an economic crisis, China would have its share of problems to solve, including the question of refugees. Chaos on the border region is not what China wants.
중국의 입장에서는 김정은이가 소위 골칫덩어리라 하더라도 북한이라고 하는 국가의 전략적 가치는 여전히 유효해요. 제재를 받는 것, 이런 것들에 대해서 미국과 좀 다른 정책을 취하는 것이 북한이 좋아서가 아니라 혹은 북중 관계가 좋아서가 아니라 그들의 이익 체계에서 북한의 전략적 가치는 여전히 유효하기 때문에 그렇게 하는 거죠.
In order to disarm North Korea, there needs to be sanctions. And for their successful implementation, China's role is critical, as it accounts for over 90% of North Korea's foreign trade. However, there is still a loophole in China's sanctions against North Korea. After North Korea's Vice President, Ri Soo-young, met with Chinese President Xi Jinping, the United States Department of the Treasury designated North Korea a primary money laundering concern.
The government continues to commit extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, arbitrary arrest and detention, forced labor, and torture. Many of these abuses are committed in political prison camps.
Japan also took tough measures against North Korea. In February 2016, Japan began imposing a series of unilateral sanctions after North Korea's fourth nuclear test.
順調に景気は上がってきているというふうに思います。今後もですね、経済政策に
よくご存知のように今金正恩体制はですね、一応宣伝的に平壌が非常に発展しているといういろんな消費的な場面をたくさん海外に宣伝放送内外にもだからそれを遮断しなきゃならないということですから、やっぱり金融的な制裁は非常に大きいと思います。というのはやっぱり金正恩体制のイメージが非常にこれでダウンするということですから、非常に効果が大きいと思いますね。
Switzerland, where Kim Jong-un is believed to hold slush funds, also began imposing strict financial sanctions against North Korea. It decided to freeze assets and all financial transactions related to North Korean accounts. Switzerland further selected 25 luxury items, including watches and wine, and banned their export to North Korea in order to limit Kim Jong-un's international activities. The Bank of Russia announced its plan to halt all financial transactions with North Korea as well. Financial sanctions are the most powerful sanction out there.
直接目的也正在于此，就是要阻止朝鲜的这个核发展和导弹发展。我想已经起了作用。当然这个作用，联合国安理会制裁决议的作用实际作用主要不是联合国常任理事国都认为这样制裁就足以使朝鲜契合。制裁主要目的就是为了阻止它的更快的核发展。
After the UN Security Council adopted the resolution on March 2nd, several countries began imposing unilateral sanctions. The South Korean government focused on putting pressure on North Korea in order to successfully enforce the new sanctions. Iran has been an active partner in North Korea's missile development. South Korea asked for Iran's cooperation in implementing the resolution.
북한 비핵화 문제와 관련해서 우리 정부의 입장을 설명하였고, 최근 북한의 핵실험에 따른 안보리 결의의 충실한 이행의 중요성을 강조하고
خواست ما عاری شدن جهان از سلاح‌های کشتار جمعی و به ویژه عاری شدن شبه جزیره کره از این گونه سلاح‌های مخرب و خاورمیانه.
Like North Korea, Iran used to develop nuclear weapons until it stopped its nuclear program in July 2015 and became free of international sanctions. It traded its nuclear program with sanction lifts from 6 major countries. As part of the New Deal, Iran allowed inspections on military bases, meetings with IAEA nuclear engineers, and even monitoring of Iran's declared nuclear sites. Economic sanctions were lifted, and Iran could resume its export of oil and gas. Would a similar nuclear deal be possible with North Korea?
일단 보통 핵을 포기할 때는 경제적 보상만이 국제 선례이지만 이란과 같이 북한은 체제 안전 보장을 요구를 하고 있습니다. 평화협정으로 한국전쟁을 종전하고 이것이 북미 간의 외교관계 수립으로 이어지고 또 주한미군 철수까지 포함됨으로써 문제가 굉장히 다차원적으로 어려웠게 된 상황입니다.
Diplomatic pressure on North Korea expanded to Europe. Last month, President Park Geun-hye visited France to celebrate the 130th anniversary of diplomatic ties and discuss creative economy, cultural cooperation in North Korea. Putting diplomatic pressure on North Korea's ally nations also proved to be a successful measure. Ethiopia, Kenya, and even Uganda agreed that North Korea must disarm.
アフリカとか中東地域とかそういういわゆるこの、あまり目につかないところで、密かに関係を持って武器を輸出するとか、あるいは軍事的協力の見返りでいろんな利益を得るということをやってきたわけで、それを世界に知らせて、これもやっぱり国際的な制裁に参加させるという意味では非常に大きな効果があったと思いますね。
On June 22nd, North Korea launched a medium-range ballistic missile, Hwasong-10. It reached an altitude of 1,413.6 kilometers and traveled 400 kilometers directly to its target. And on July 8, 2016, South Korea and the United States announced the deployment of the THAAD system. The division of Korea after the war, and North and South Korea's tense military standoff. The collision between the United States and China's national interests, and weapons pointed at each other across the DMZ. Tension on the Korean Peninsula has escalated over time. Will North Korea surrender nuclear weapons? Will the international community be able to denuclearize North Korea? Peace on Earth demands it.